I did residency at First Draft last year after having been a director of the space several years earlier, and it was really, I was one of the people who was involved in setting that program up, and then, you know, finishing being a director and saying goodbye to First Draft. It was really nice to be able to come back into the space and, you know, meet like other directors that I hadn't known and work in the space that I felt like I knew very well. So the work that I have here, it's not, they're sort of like some artefacts gathered from different bodies of work that I've made. So I'm working with this material called Fimo, which is a synthetic polymer clay. It's just like plasticine, but you bake it in the oven and it goes hard, and it's a craft product essentially. But I just like it because it's a really easy to use material, and when you don't have a studio at the gallery that you're showing at, and you can work in a small space, and you can work at home, and it, you know, don't need ventilation and all of that kind of thing. And I'm really pro that relative to doing like large photographic works that cost a lot of money. And my background is in photography, and I'm still doing that as well. I'm now folding my sculptural practice into a photographic practice as well, and starting to make animations and things and bring in all the bits. I think it's to do with representing something that I can see around me, or something that I'm involved with. So it was kind of like a narrative work about being stuck at your desk and trying to think of ideas, and then using what's around you, and reproducing objects, but also reproducing the sort of notes and ideas and things. Like I made kind of sculptural objects that were post-it notes, and like little line sculptural things that are like a kind of a drawing, and the way that they were all installed together was, some of them were real and some of them were like representations of a thing that was two-dimensional. Anyway. Yes, what I'm working on now is, well, I've got a project show at Green Space coming up, and I'm making some photographic works to do with some graffiti that I see every day in my workplace, and I'm remaking some documents that are in like A4 pieces of paper with Times New Roman, and I've made a Times New Roman alphabet that's three-dimensional, and then it's been photographed and two-dimensionalized so that they're like pieces of paper again. So I don't know, there's sort of reflexive thing going on about making something that looks real but doesn't really look real, because you know, there's sort of these bubbly, friendly things, but
So for those of you who haven't been formally introduced, this is Leo Coyte, and these are his paintings.
At the time I started the residency, I think I just hit my 30s, and I was about to have a baby. I was having a little bit of a crisis. And I thought I'd make some work about my teenage years. I kind of grew up in a hippie kind of area on the north coast. I was originally from Cooper Street, just around the corner. My parents moved up to the north coast, total life change. So I was trying to make work about that time, and I guess the plywood was the first thing that came to mind, because me and my brother and my friends would always build skate ramps at everybody's houses, and I kind of moved from there. I was reminded about my parents' kind of ad hoc lifestyle, where, you know, if I needed a skateboard, my dad, being an artist, would kind of research how to make one. So yeah, I had all these sheets of plywood laying around as well, because I'm also renovating a house, so I was able to copy those pieces of wood, you know, pretty much best I could. So kind of shopping around different $2 stores, being, you know, a cheapskate. I am looking for inspiration, and I was coming across all these masks, and a lot of them were Bin Laden and George Bush. You kind of make out George Bush's nose there, at least Bin Laden's lips. Sorry, Bin Laden's nose and lips, and George Bush's ears and eyes. And this is Bin Laden's hat and beard. And with some other horror masks, and I was kind of looking back at all those teenage kind of album covers and skateboard graphics that I liked at the time, was listening to a lot of kind of heavy music, and I wanted to make paintings that were as heavy as the music I was kind of still am listening to. So I was also looking at the cliches as well, you know, these horror masks and maybe with death metal album covers and tacky skateboards and, you know, Bin Laden and George Bush, a kind of cliche new evil of today's era. Combining kind of hardware materials like wood and painting them in a kind of highly representational kind of matter to give them more importance, perhaps, like an oil and canvas or linen, and kind of turning hardware materials into high art almost. This one, Slow Blow, was kind of a reference to, I had a memory of kids burning their names and stuff into the top of the roofs above picnic benches and writing kind of crude things. This one, A Vulgar Display of Power, was separate to these works, but it was done at a similar time. It was for a show at Mott, and it was kind of based on tributes. It was a tribute to Dimebag Darrell, who had died that year. He'd gotten shot on stage, kind of in front of his drummer. Dimebag Darrell was the guitarist, and his drummer was his brother. And I play in a band with my brother, so I was kind of like, well, imagine getting shot on stage in front of your brother, and you know, in front of all those people. That had a bit of an impact on me, so I made that work for that reason. And I kind of stuck George Bush's eyes on there because he was kind of abusing his power at the time.
And the premise of the show was called Field Trip USA, and it was about my trip, or just a reflection on like aspects of my trip to the States between April and June. I think a fundamental part of my practice is sort of taking aspects of the everyday and pushing it into like a fantasy space. It can be kind of psychedelic, or it might be pushing it into like a liminal thing where it's a bit blurred, like objects that, you know, the function is quite clear is pushed into an area where it's kind of unclear, and I think that manifests fairly obviously, or perhaps not, but we can talk about that later in the donuts work here. And also as a series of objects, I think that there's a certain sense of process that comes up in this arrangement of objects. The material that I was working with, and for the first time ever, was just air drying clay that you buy from the art supply store, and covered in acrylic paints and glazes and whatnot, which actually turned out to be quite a hassle. And since I'm back at school now studying at SCA doing my honours, and I'm working with like proper ceramics, which has been a real blast, and I've got the first draft residency program to somewhat thank for getting me into clay works and, you know, pushing that part of my practice into a more, I suppose, like slightly more high-end kind of way. Anyhow, they're meant to be kind of like these vegan donuts that are like a standard thing that you see in cafes everywhere, like, or all up and down the east and west coasts where I was visiting. But that was just the starting point for me to get the objects going, and these Coyte stands came out, and this obvious like sort of sexual innuendo came out with the like decorating the donuts being quite visceral and abject, and then the noses started to appear on the sticks, which had come up in my practice in a previous work that I did for a portrait show at Boris and Dolores. It was curated by Shane Hazeman and Koji Rui called I Me Mine. So I suppose there's a part of myself in there, and then these other objects that like the stems, and they sort of like flower out. That's where I actually, you know, just like started pressing my own nose into the stick. So that kind of like a performative, I suppose, like element. And then other just random sort of arbitrary objects like the bottle with the symbol on the stick, which if you care to hear the story, when we were in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park on Hippie Hill, watching some bums and hippies and ferals and just general jammers like banging on their drums and doing their thing. This guy had like his like bourbon bottle with a stick and a symbol, like a proper symbol, not one made out of clay. You know, that he was sort of banging away, and his sort of like ad hoc object really caught my eye, and, you know, it was just another little fragment of my trip that I thought I'd throw into the series. Anyhow, that's the gist of most of the work that went in that show and that came out of the